So is this an adaptation of the Book of Acts?
Oh no, it's about a minister who kills someone. Not like that.
Welcome back to Faith on Film, where we raid your church library in search of the good stuff. I'm Nathan.
And I'm Stephanie. In the late 1970s, actor Robert Duvall developed an idea that he really wanted to make into a movie. Like many of us, he had been exposed to Christianity many times throughout his life, and he really wanted to make a film that he felt did the subject justice. So, in 1997, The Apostle was released.
I thought you said he came up with the idea in the late 70s.
I did.
What took so long?
Oh, nobody in Hollywood wanted to make it.
They were intimidated by the subject matter, weren't they? I could see a studio executive saying, "Oh no, secular audiences wouldn't be interested because it's too faith-based," and this was before
Yeah.
Passion of the Christ proved that wrong. And Christian audiences wouldn't be interested because it portrays a man of God as doing some really reprehensible things.
In an interview with Guidepost, Duvall said, "I took my script to Hollywood producers and was met with the same response. Bob, religion is not a subject our audiences want to watch. I disagree. Why wouldn't audiences want to watch a movie about something that is foremost in so many people's lives?"
If nobody was supporting him, how did he get the movie made? Did he finance it himself or something?
Why, yes, he did.
Oh.
And today we reap the benefits of the fruit of that labor. So after basically 13 years in development hell, at least, this is The Apostle. I gotta say, this movie kind of feels like that great American novel that was never a novel. You know what I mean?
I think so. Like a lot of the characters are really well developed. They appear very simple at first glance, but once you start paying closer attention, there's more intricate detail going on. For example, Robert Duvall's character, Sonny, who later changes his name to the Apostle EF for reasons we will get into, at one point drunkenly refers to another character as Rodney, even though that man's name is actually Horace. Much, much later in the film, he casually mentions that his brother was named Rodney. And that's the kind of detail that makes it feel like it was artfully crafted, artfully cut down from a much larger book.
Well, just look at the supporting characters. There are actual backstories here, like the twice-divorced Elmo, or the twice-widowed Sister Jewel, or Sister Johnson, who we learn later was abandoned by her husband and left to raise her twin boys alone. Much like in Jesus of Nazareth, we're looking at background characters and extras who are fully realized people with their own problems. They're not just props that are here for the main characters to bounce off.
Even the sets are well developed. Just look at this radio station, and you can tell that it's a small thing that somebody just decided to put up in their house one day.
So what you're saying is that Elmo's little radio station is an equivalent of our little YouTube show.
More or less. And that's not the only instance of great visual storytelling. It's all over this movie. For instance, at one point, Sonny is staying with a stranger in the bayous, and the man seems quite jovial with him throughout the day, but once he goes to bed, he cradles up a shotgun next to him as he watches Sonny sleep out in the backyard. It's a very, very good way of conveying that he does not actually trust Sonny.
You know, just in case. It really is a shame that Robert Duvall didn't direct more movies afterwards, because he actually has a talent for this. He knows how to set up a scene, and he knows how to fill the scene with the right characters, the right props, and just let them do their thing. That it really is. It is very interesting. You would not guess that this was his directorial debut. Let's put it that way. Speaking of nuance, let's talk about Duvall's wife, Jessie, played by the late Farrah Fawcett. This is probably the character that my opinion has changed the most about over the years with repeated viewings. Basically, adult me is a little better at picking up subtlety than 12-year-old me was. At first glance, okay, she's cheating on her husband. And at first glance, this completely comes out of nowhere. There is no justification for this. She's just a rotten wife. But looking at it again a little closer, you can kind of tell in her body language that she is genuinely afraid of her husband here. This has been an unhappy, at best, marriage for years. Just look at how quickly she unloads the gun that he brings with him when he goes to confront her about her affair.
Jesse was also cheating on Sonny with the youth minister named Horace.
Of all people.
Of all people. So not only is his lover going behind his back, one of his good friends is complicit in it. So everybody betray him. He's fed up with this world.
Put a pin in that comparison. We'll come back to that.
The two successfully lobby the church to get Sonny removed from his position, adding to the sense of betrayal.
Gotta love church politics. Almost as fun as real politics. Just as screwy, just as likely to bring out the worst in people, and just as unpredictable.
It is at this point that Sonny shows up to a church baseball game drunk, and in a rage, conks Horace on the head with a baseball bat. While Horace does not die immediately, his death is directly attributable to Sonny's actions, so the latter goes on the run. And that's our inciting incident! Mama just killed a man, put a bat into his head, he slept with my wife, now he's dead. Mama, life had just begun, and now I've gone and thrown it all away.
Well, as Sonny has fled, he does inevitably leave some traumatized children and his dear mother in his wake. And if Mama looks familiar, that is because this was one of the final film appearances of June Carter Cash.
Sonny has a good bond with his mother, but you get some hints that she really wants him to spend less time at his job. Based on the opening where he is brought to church as a young boy by a black woman who is clearly not June Carter Cash, it's even possible that she's not very religious herself, if at all, and is only indulging him because she knows it's what he's passionate about. Possibly.
Or is legitimately just gone too much. Either way, she has probably my favorite line in the whole movie. A neighbor calls while Sonny is ranting at God, because in Duvall's words, if Job could do it, why can't Sonny? About the loss of his wife and the loss of his church and everything. And to the neighbor, June says, well, sometimes he talks to the Lord, sometimes he yells at the Lord. Tonight he just happens to be yelling at him.
She very much loves her son.
Oh, she does. And he loves her.
So when he goes on the run, it's actually quite heartbreaking that he can't be with her when she goes to the hospital, even though he brought it upon himself.
Mm-hmm.
And then when she actually does die, only one person attends her funeral at all. Well, that's tragic. This woman didn't do anything to deserve that except have a son who was kind of a moron.
Well, sadly, there's always a very good chance that she drove everyone away because she probably stuck by her son. Probably insisted that he didn't do anything wrong, which meant that she probably died alone and bitter. And this is what I mean by the great American novel that was never a novel. You could do this story from the point of view of many other characters. You could do a whole movie just focusing on how the community in Texas somehow rebounds after Sonny leaves. But that is not our story. Sonny is our story. And yes, he is now the Apostle EF. And, well, gotta give him points for being able to rebound rather quickly. He starts a relationship of sorts with this one woman at the radio station named Toosie, played by Miranda Richardson. But it's okay because she's separated. I think this is supposed to be a little squicky.
Well, it does fit well with his established character. When he confronts Jesse about the cheating, he does mention that he'd had a wandering eye, which is one of the few times that we are told about a character trait before we've seen it. Most of the time, we definitely see it first.
His love life isn't the only place he's rebounding. Let's talk about that new church that he's going to establish, which does make up the bulk of this movie.
When he goes, he meets up with a retired preacher by the name of Charles Blackwell, which is the most ministerial sounding name I've ever heard, and convinces him to get back into the game. They open up Blackwell's abandoned church, they put out radio ads, they even drive around a Jesus-mobile to come pick up people who can't drive themselves to church. And it picks up speed pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
They get a thriving community. It's not big, but the people that they have are very dedicated to being there.
And it grows much bigger. The congregation at the beginning of the movie and at the end of the movie, it's quite the growth spurt. But I know you said you were minorly concerned about, was this church just a cult of personality? What did you mean by that?
Well, it feels for a large part of the movie like they are just riding off of the passion and charisma of their figurehead. And we, the audience, know that he's on the run from the law, so we're just looking at our watches waiting for him to get arrested at any time.
So will this place fall apart when he's gone?
Yeah, you're kind of wondering if that's going to happen, but they wind up growing together as a result of his presence, so that when he's brought out of the picture, you don't think they're going to collapse. You're left with the distinct impression they are going to continue on as they have been. And when Sonny is arrested, he leaves the keys for Charles Blackwell to carry on the legacy. In effect, he got Charles Blackwell's groove back.
You really could almost tell this story from Blackwell's perspective about how the stranger came into town and inspired him to get back into the ministry, couldn't you?
You could, but I feel like that would turn Duvall's character into a manic pixie dream preacher.
Now, one of the things that is very interesting about this movie is the casting. Because you've got the big name actors over here. You got your Robert Duvall, your Farrah Fawcett, and then you got complete unknowns over in the other corner. But then you've also got these semi-well-known actors in between filling out a lot of the other supporting roles, such as Charles Blackwell, who is played by John Beasley. Fun fact, I actually got to meet John Beasley.
Oh.
Yeah, he actually runs a local community theater here in Omaha, and I got to go to one of his plays. There's this one scene in the movie where Duvall's character is part of a rally, and Robert Duvall actually went out and he got real charismatic ministers and he just filmed them doing their thing. And he said afterwards he just hoped he could keep up when it was his turn.
According to legend, they had to stop filming because one of the cameramen was so emotionally affected that he converted on the spot.
This is almost taking a page out of the Gospel according to St. Matthew. And if you have been to a charismatic church, you have met these people.
And then there's another semi-famous name, Walton Goggins as Sam, of Justified and Hateful Eight fame. Sam doesn't do all that much for the majority of the runtime. He's just kind of doing whatever the rest of the congregation is doing, and his main distinctive is being the only white guy in regular attendance. But he does become very important by the end.
Mm-hmm. You wouldn't be referring to the scene where Duvall is confessing to Blackwell about what really happened back in Fort Worth, and it turns out that Sam was outside the window the whole time and heard the whole thing, and then a few scenes later the police find him at the church, would you?
That's exactly what I would be referring to. There is some ambiguity about whether or not Sam was the one who blew the whistle, because there is a scene in between those two where Jesse happens to pick up EF's radio ad. But Sonny is holed up way over here in Louisiana. And Jesse is way over here in Texas, in Fort Worth, Texas. So I highly doubt a dinky little radio station way over here is going to broadcast all the way over here. When the cops show up, Sam watches EF nervously because he's the one who knows the truth. However, EF, rather than taking the assembly as an opportunity to run from the law yet again, he finishes his sermon and delivers one of the greatest messages he's given in his entire career. And I think it's this dedication to his sermon, to his congregation, that inspires Sam so much, because Sam comes forward during the final altar call, sobbing uncontrollably.
You know, now would be a great time to talk about how to do conversion scenes correctly.
Well?
So, a lot of Christian movies, especially modern Christian movies, include a conversion scene. And, I don't know, they often come off as kind of shallow. I think it's because the intention isn't the scene isn't character driven as much as it's exposition driven. We need the character to come to know Jesus because that's what's going to kick the plot in motion. It feels like a lot of times like the purpose of the scene is to spell out the gospel message for any non-Christians in the audience who might happen to be watching. And Christian audiences cheer because what they believe is being spoken in a movie that they are watching. You know what I mean?
What, you mean to tell me that you're not drawn in by Kirk Cameron chasing a random character out into the street to tell him how much of a sinner he is and how much he needs Jesus? Or just so happening to walk around and stop at a cross at the right time for a dramatic moment to make Kirk Cameron feel bad? Wow, Kirk Cameron's bad at this.
Yeah, we're gonna get to him sometime. The point is, again, they are exposition driven, they are not so much character driven. Somehow, Duvall manages to get a conversion scene right, not once, but 3 times in one movie. You taking notes, Mr. Cameron?
We've already talked about Sam, so let's roll it back to the beginning of the film, where Sonny and Mama come across a car wreck on the road. And Sonny goes to speak to the individuals who have been hit by the car. No, this one surprisingly works. Let me explain why. First of all, the authorities are already on the scene, so it's not like Sonny's a jerk for not calling them and not getting help. Second of all, we haven't spent an entire movie following these two, so it's not like this is divine retribution for them being gigantic douchebags. And third, Sonny at no point calls their deaths a miracle. Just saying, that's not a great selling point.
Yeah, we're gonna get to you someday, too.
I will note, however, that if this were a PureFlix film, that scene would be the linchpin of an entire plot.
Yeah, and the cop who tells Sonny that he can't be there. How much do you want to bet he'd be the antagonistic atheist?
Oh, definitely.
Oh, yeah. This would be like 1/6 of a plot.
We're just describing Do You Believe at this point, aren't we?
Yeah, I think we are.
Anywho, enough with the comparisons. Let's talk about this scene on its own merits.
Yes, please.
You can tell that Sonny is coming from a place of compassion for these young folks. In the way he talks with them, and then in the way that he prays for their well-being with Mama as they drive away. Let me put it this way. If it was me in the car wreck, I would not be mad at Sonny for approaching me like this. Because he's just doing what he can to help. he may not be able to do much, but he believes in someone who can. And that's admirable. Now, the biracial pastoral bromance in God's Not Dead, I'd probably have a little bit of an issue with them, but it's a matter of attitude.
And again, this is what I mean by this by character driven versus exposition driven. The main purpose of this conversion scene really is to introduce us to Sonny as a character, to introduce to us his love of evangelism and just in general the good he is capable of doing. And then there's the other major conversion scene with Billy Bob Thornton. Now, Billy Bob Thornton took this small part as a thank you to Robert Duvall, who had done a role in one of his earlier movies. He plays a local troublemaker whose main gripe is he doesn't like interracial worship. He and Sonny get into a literal fight. And I do mean, actually, punching each other. One character actually says, "You ever see a preacher hit a man like that?" While the congregation is inside singing Power in the Blood. And then Billy Bob Thornton comes back with a bulldozer with the intention of taking the church out.
He is stopped from driving through the church, mostly by the crowd of human beings between the bulldozer and the building, but they set a Bible in front of him and dare him to run it over.
Yeah, Sister Jewel even goes behind and puts her Bible down so he can't even back up without running over a Bible.
He finds himself unable to actually drive over it, and then he finds that he won't even pick it up and move it out of the way because the congregation starts chanting, "Nobody moves that book." It's one of those scenes that makes perfect sense while you're watching it, but it's hard to explain back after the fact. My guess as to what's going on in Thornton's head is that he's so struck by the devotion that all these people have to a book that they have dozens of copies of anyway, and in his confusion and intrigue about that dedication, he himself is drawn into it, and the book itself becomes the locus of that dedication. But since I admit that I'm the non-believer here, I'm approaching this from a more sociological standpoint. It's my 2 cents anyway.
Either way, we have a scene where a troublemaker that we really don't know that much about is drawn to something larger than himself. And it is beautifully acted. Yeah, it also helps that the likes of Billy Bob Thornton and Walton Goggins are actually good actors. But the main thing is you aren't even 100% sure what Duvall and Thornton are saying to each other because it's mostly done in whispering. I think the 91st Psalm is involved, I'm not sure. But that's what makes this scene work. You are drawn in because Thornton is drawn in. And that is how you do a conversion scene.
And now we come to the million-dollar question you've probably been asking yourself. Is Sonny a good man or not? Surely if he kills a man and goes on the run from the law and sets up a church in the backwaters of Louisiana, he's just doing some skeevy things with his authority, or bilking the populace for their money, or just doing it to get a big ego trip, right?
No.
Oh, so killing Horace was justified and he's on the run wrongfully like Jean Valjean.
No.
Oh.
And that is why this movie got top reviews from critics such as Roger Ebert and A.O. Scott. As Scott said, a simpler film would have made EF out to be a fraud or a saint. But he's both.
I think it would be more constructive to think of him as less of a good man or a bad man, and more like George C. Scott's Patton or Charles Foster Kane.
Or any given cast member of Game of Thrones, for that matter.
Majorly morally gray is what we're saying. When they do good stuff, it's for kind of a bad reason. When they do bad stuff, it's for kind of a good reason. But if we're going biblical on it, because the movie is entitled The Apostle, Sonny is often compared to King David. Now, if you ask your average Christian about King David, the description you'll get is more of a stalwart, humble hero who faltered that one time, but God still loved him anyway. I'm gonna disagree with that image. David was kind of a rogue agent who raided towns that hadn't done him any wrong to steal their stuff, and ran a protection racket on Nabal, and would loudly mourn his enemies' deaths, all while reaping the benefits of said deaths. And all of that happens before he becomes king.
And before Bathsheba enters the
Well
equation.
before Bathsheba enters the equation.
And I think that's why King David actually is an apt comparison to Sonny. If Tevye is Job, Sonny is David. Because you could interpret it the traditional way. You could interpret this movie as this Holy Ghost-filled preaching machine who is genuinely filled with love for God and love for his work. But he happened to lose his cool and clunked his youth minister over the head with a baseball bat that one time. Or he was a negligent husband, father, and preacher who, through his womanizing and through other things, simply not being there, led to the destruction of his life, and he reacted incredibly immaturely by clunking his youth minister over the head with a baseball bat that one time. It really does come down to the viewer. And that's what's so great. That's what a good character study should do.
But let's not focus entirely on his negatives, because Sonny really does want to do good things, he just forgets sometimes.
That is almost verbatim Robert Duvall's description of this character in the DVD's audio commentary.
Really? I was just saying it off the cuff.
Yeah, no, really.
Oh, well, that's cool. But the thing is, you really get the sense that the community he starts is a positive for all the people involved. Whether you like Sonny or not, whether you believe in God or not, you really feel like these people's lives are enriched by being part of the church.
Well, here's a perfect example. There's an old man who comes to the first service with a trumpet because Sonny had said in his radio ad to bring your instruments to church. And he stands up and he plays, and it's pretty bad squawking. But then at the end of the movie, he stands up again and he plays again. And it's not amazing, but it's a coherent tune. That's just a small microcosm of how these people have changed and grown because the apostle came to their town. This movie really is, in a lot of ways, about the sin nature, because Duvall's character is capable of great evil, but he is also capable of great good. Christian movies like to talk a lot about what dirty, rotten sinners their characters are, but very few movies actually decide to just go for it and let their character be a dirty, rotten sinner. And everybody can find redemption. That was this movie's tagline, actually. Lust, obsession, revenge, redemption. Sonny, you could look at Sonny's actions in this movie as he wants to do as much good for God as possible before the inevitable long arm of the law finds him. And, because you can't keep a good apostle down, once he is caught at the end, he settles into his new life, preaching to his fellow inmates.
I will note, however, that we also have a very good example of the fact that just because someone is in the clergy does not automatically make them a good person.
Mm-hmm.
And trying to hide someone being a terrible person only hurts your cause in the long run.
Covering up a scandal for the good of the kingdom only hurts the kingdom.
Right. And a big part of asking ourselves if Sonny is a good man is whether or not he feels bad about anything he did, which is really complicated to untangle. I guess he does rebaptize himself at one point.
And my parents used to always wonder about the theological implications of that.
So you could read that as he recognizes he did something wrong and is repenting of it. But at the same time, anytime he talks about what happened with his old church, he just frames it as the devil was out to get him, painting himself as a victim rather than someone who was complicit in the events.
But then at the same time, when he's alone, he gets genuinely weepy and his talks with God. He is aware that what he did not please God. He actually says at one point that what happened to Mama is God getting back at him. So he knows what he did not please God. Later!
I think I would read him as he knows what he did was technically wrong, but hasn't really grappled with the fact that he made a choice. He thinks that what he did was all the result of other people's actions.
He doesn't actually put that much effort into his alias. We learn at the end of the movie that Apostle EF, his full name is actually Ulysses F. Dewey. So read into that what you will.
Well, all that aside, Duvall's so good in this part. He must have had like a charismatic background, right?
I don't really know. When you look the guy up on Wikipedia, the personal life section doesn't really mention any religious affiliation. Just mentions politics and marriages and stuff, but nothing about that. Really, all we have to go off of is that interview with Guideposts, which we will be putting a link to in the description. He is so mesmerizing in this part. This movie actually regularly comes up when in the top 3 spots when talking about the great Robert Duvall performances, and it's easy to see why. He is so energetic, so passionate, and his character cannot turn it off. Right down to where he's walking down the road going, "Which way, Lord, which way?" You can tell that Duvall has the utmost respect for charismatic Christianity. And I think, in the end, I'm sure the development hell was very frustrating for him, but in the end, a wonderful film was made, and I am so happy it turned out that way. So often, passion projects of an actor or a director, it takes them that long to get it made, and they end up not being that good. Duvall ended up writing, directing, producing, and starring in this movie. And historically, that has not always been a good thing.
No. For instance, The Room.
Told you we were going to come back to that.
Tommy Wiseau casts himself as the perfect man that people do horrible things to for no apparent reason. And it just feels like a gigantic ego trip, or his own lack of understanding of why certain things have happened to him in his own life. That's not really what we have with the Apostle. If it was just the Robert Duvall show, I don't think we would have gotten Charles Blackwell's great speech about why he originally left the ministry, or Walton Goggins' amazing facial acting in his final scene. He really gives his other actors a chance to showcase their abilities, and all of it comes together into just a fantastic film.
It really is a shame that more people don't watch this movie. I would easily give The Apostle a money's worth. It's wonderfully acted, wonderfully directed. The characters are very interesting. It will most definitely get your small group talking afterwards.
I'll agree with that. Thank you for joining us for Faith on Film. I'm Nathan.
And I'm Stephanie. We'll see you next time.
If I'm not back again this time tomorrow, carry on, as if nothing really matters.
Did you just make that all up right now?
Oh no, that's Bohemian Rhapsody. I changed a couple of the lyrics, but for the most part it's the same.
That was supposed to be my transition.
Oh!
Oh yeah, we're supposed to talk about Duvall being